Hello there, it's Ian Peterson here. I head up sales and operations for Penta Technology. I've got Phil Smith in the room with me.
Hey Ian, how you doing?
I'm doing well. What's your role now, Phil? Head of consulting, head of spoons?
Strategy and architecture.
Strategy and architecture. Head of strategy and architecture. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our platform, which gets us, helps people get into the cloud very quickly. It's an automation platform. You came up with something a few years back where you said DevOps is dead. Well, DevOps is done.
DevOps is done, yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a bit more? And do you think it's still the case?
I think it's definitely the case that DevOps is a done deal in terms of we should be automating the deployment and support and maintenance of software solutions. Yeah, so in terms of a strategy and approach within technology, making sure that these things are reliable and repeatable is a done deal. We've sold that to the boards, and then that's where money's been invested clearly in the kind of DevOps movement over the last few years. I also think that largely, if you're asking the right people, that solutions for codifying infrastructure are largely done. There are solutions, our platform in particular, which we're here to talk about today, it's a good example of a solution where a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the heavy thinking has been done and already codified in a reusable way.
Okay.
But I think there's a challenge is that in businesses today, I see an awful lot of clients that get the DevOps message and that they want to do that. And in a similar way that when people decide that they need new software, they turn to software developers and compilers. They're still turning to DevOps engineers to start essentially from scratch to reinvent the wheel again. I think that's the bit where the paper I wrote particularly, DevOps was done, was to try to get the message across that there are options beyond starting from scratch and coding your own infrastructure.
So is that the same concept as it's inherent in software engineering since I've been involved in it, that people like handcrafting stuff rather than automating? It's considered an almost cottage industry, software engineering. If you speak to some of our peers back in the early agile days, everything needed to be bespoke. Do you think that period's now past?
I think with the agile movement and the software engineering principles and practices that agile demands to do agile properly, and this applies to codifying business and application logic as much as it does to codifying infrastructure. The software engineering practices have led teams down the track of coding, writing code, and treating it as a software engineering discipline.
Okay.
I think that still has its place, but in a similar way that we have our platform for generating infrastructure as code rapidly from templates and tools rather than from an empty text file. The same is true with software development. There are many cases where we can use tools to develop software using low code or high productivity application development platforms. So you can see systems like Appian, OutSystems, Mendix, and our infrastructure platform kind of sits alongside those in the same vein, where an awful lot of the forward thinking and the problem solving is being done. And there are predefined patterns that we can use and apply in different circumstances.
So do you think that demystifies the role of the infrastructure engineer, or the DevOps engineer as their term now?
Well, I hope largely that it means that we can move back to a world where we specify what we want in a declarative kind of way, and then expect that is essentially an off-the-shelf commodity resource that we can just have. Rather than saying this is what we want, here are the requirements, let's set up a project to deliver on these requirements, and then we have to invest a lot of time and risk into building that essentially from scratch and with the skills of the resources that we can obtain at the time.
I think one of the things that I've encountered over the years is that in some areas you do come across people or managers that are building little fiefdoms, and any layer of automation and indeed AI as well is really encroaching on their area and their subject expertise, and they feel threatened. They feel threatened by it. If you talk to a CIO or you're in a boardroom, Phil, they don't see it like that, do they? So I think this is a problem we've always had, is communicating at top level, where people see the importance of automation and repeatability and obviously the cost savings that bring in. But at a lower level, we still have this, let's hand crank it, or we can do that. We've got a team that could do that. And they don't think of the business implications of where that is. Do you think something like COVID-19 might change that, just because people are starting to think, well, we've got to do perhaps a bit more with less resources? Or do you think that we'll always encounter that problem where essentially robots and computers take over people's jobs?
I think characterising people who are protecting their technology space as feeling threatened and somehow being counterproductive is probably, I wouldn't want to characterise people in that way. I think they're all trying to do their best by their employers or the organisations they're working in. Everyone, we have to have faith that everybody's doing their best.
Yeah. Okay.
I just think that there's a really broad range of approaches to solving problems, and I think an awful lot of technology people who essentially have a software development background, they have fairly, sounds bad, but not limited, but they have a set of skills that they can use to solve problems. They enjoy using those skills to solve those problems, and they will apply them to every problem that exists. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you ask me if we could write software to do that, the answer is always yes.
Yes.
When the software developers head on, having been a software developer, of course we can do that.
Yeah.
When do you want to? We can always do it, can't we? But I think there is this, it is kind of, it's that cognitive bias thinking. You're siloed thinking. You're working with developers, especially in smaller organisations where the directors and the board might be developers or previously were in software development. It's something, get this kind of group think and this cognitive bias towards software engineering as the way to solve all problems. Whereas there are other software engineers that have solved these problems in the past in a much more elegant, sometimes a more elegant way, or sometimes the way that you're about to do it. But you can de-risk your entire delivery just by buying that off the shelf rather than doing it again.
Actually, I think that on reflection, I might have been being slightly unfair, because the people that really do understand our platform happen to be DevOps engineers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that you talked about, you mentioned the phrase crafting engineer, and I think there is a movement for software craftsmanship, which I completely support, where software engineering is required, software craftsmanship is required. But we need to move beyond the days where nearly everything we built is hand built by craftsmen, and hand stitched leather steering wheels on your Lamborghini is one thing. If everybody has a Lamborghini, we're going to be in trouble. We need to move into the world where we are happy and comfortable using mass-produced software. And I use the term industrializing software engineering practice. So we do. There is a place for craftsmanship, but it's by far from everywhere. It's in the corners of the problem space, and where we want to have a specific bit of secret sauce in our business solutions.
Yeah.
But the large bulk of what we need to deliver can be achieved using tools that are made by craftsmen that will produce and reproduce code reliably and predictably over time.
So our platform works on practically any cloud, but also on VMware and TIN. I got asked an interesting question the other week as to what does the cloud mean to you? And obviously I had a salesperson's slant to that answer, and I've waffled something about infrastructure as code and the reams of possibilities it brought to an average developer in terms of having that processing power and storage capability of a big bank or any big Fortune 500 company. What does it mean to you? Because I think that you sort of blur the lines between business and technology in your role. Is there anything that it means to you specifically?
So cloud to me, it's just, I think the availability of flexible essentially infinitely scalable compute and storage resources is number one. Where I haven't got to invest a lot of additional money and risk and time in standing up, maintaining and securing my own data centers and my own infrastructure. That's been commoditized fantastically well. So it's that availability of infrastructure and removing that risk, cost, time element from delivery, because cloud to me is a nebulous thing. It's something that's easily formed and easily changed, and can be formed and can be dispersed as and when required. And I think to me, cloud is flexibility, and that agility question. All enterprises are being sold agility as a process, or agility as a bunch of tools, but agility is really all about our ability to change our minds and change direction, but under control. Yeah. So it's all very well being able to dart here and dart there everywhere, but if we haven't got control of that, we're
Can you use some flying analogy with that?
Yeah, let's go. Let's not overcomplicate things here. Yeah. There is an analogy with combat aircraft. Where they're designed to be unstable in order that they can be more agile and can turn more quickly and respond more quickly to the threats and opportunities that are presented to them. But they require control systems, and they require quite a tight degree of control. So look at a modern 5th generation fast jet. It has a number of computer systems on board, which without which it would fall out of the sky and be uncontrollable by the machine.
I didn't think that complicated things. I thought that was a very good description of what agile means. So, which is why I'm pleased that you said it.
Yeah, and I think cloud is just one. It's one of the things that we can deploy that enables us to change direction without a lot of impediment.
Yeah,
it moves problems out of the way.
So you've got cloud as a great platform for flexibility, agility, and infinite possibilities. Where does infinite possibilities take us in the immediate future that you can see at the moment? Is it AI? Is it some of the data analytics that we can do now? Is it cryptos? Where do you think we're heading?
I think all of those are interesting spaces. To my mind, the thing is that we don't know. And an awful lot of enterprises don't know what's up next for them. And they need to be able to change direction pretty quickly, or park what they have been doing and do something completely new. And the ability to do that very rapidly, and even just to try things, for a few months, without the huge overhead of having to design and commission infrastructure. Being able to just stand up something and try it for a few months and seeing if that works in our world at the moment, as it is so rapidly changing, it's going to become an invaluable resource. So R&D moves kind of out of the lab and into production.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about architecture and whether we design architectures to create long-standing edifices that will stand the test of time, and architects who attempt to future-proof their design. And we spend months and months trying to work out how to future-proof something. And the concept of a Tokyo-style architecture, where when we find out that it's wrong, we tear it down and start again. Yeah, we can invest far, far less time in that kind of big upfront thinking architecturally, and just do something and try it. And we can try it in for real in production. And if it works, it works, and fantastic. We can build on it. If it doesn't, we haven't invested a lot of time and capital, and we can throw it away and start again.
Yeah.
And that flexibility, that ability, and that willingness to discard what you have invested time and effort into is directly proportional to the amount of time and effort you've invested into it.
Yes.
If we're going to be agile, we need to be prepared to admit that what we tried was wrong and move on.
In my experience, it's quite unusual in large architecture teams.
Because architects, we invest our lives and sweat and toil and emotion arguments into a particular design.
Yes.
We invest far too much. There's a conversation I had with another architect about the best UML tool when UML was the thing. So we just hold up a pencil because it's the easiest thing to screw up a piece of paper and throw it away when it's wrong.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Rather than investing hours and hours in drawing beautiful architecture diagrams in a modelling tool.
Yes, no, I see.
The prevalence of the whiteboard and stickies is exactly that, is that, the agile movement loves stickies because when we're wrong, we throw them away.
Yeah, got it. So all of this sort of fits into really the practice you lead, which I would suggest is CIO, CTO advisory services.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to get larger organizations typically to think and behave like a startup. And is that Tokyo architecture where you throw away stuff? Or is it a combination of lots of things? I'm thinking, for example, that a startup might have much more flexibility about where they procure or how they hire, for example. They haven't got so many rigid rules in place.
I think act like a startup is interesting. A lot of startups behave appallingly.
Yes,
and they have, because they're driven by their investors' demands or what they currently perceive to be the right thing to do, and they're often wrong. And I think that very early stage is an interesting space. So some startups, I think if you look at the kind of the post-startup, early stage, mid-stage investment. So once we've established where we're going and we have a strategy, I think that's the place where we need to move organisations to move them away from their older processes where you have people who have been in an organisation for 10, 15, 20 years, haven't seen much of what happens outside. We were helping organisations to move towards that mindset of accepting change.
Yes.
And being prepared to throw away often your work and the work of others that's been hard fought over. I think that's one of the main things we want to try and encourage organisations to do is to think. To stop thinking that your legacy still has value.
Yes.
If you persist in trying to fulfil or follow a strategy that's wrong, then you're investing more time and money in something that's destined to fail. Kodak and digital cameras is a good example.
Yes, of course.
Continue to insist that film is the future, and suddenly find someone else has come along and eaten your lunch. I think we often talk about agile. Talks a lot about and there's a huge marketing push about how startups and fintech companies are going to take over from the incumbent organizations. I think that's actually a much harder thing.
Agile being the parent type stuff.
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of talk around that concept in order to sell, air quotes, agile. And you need to be agile in order to handle the threat of upstarts eating your lunch. I think there's it's not about startups eating your lunch. It's about making sure that you can find the next meal. Because what organisations making profits out of today are probably not going to be the same
in a few years' time.
There are going to be other areas, and being able to get to those markets before startups, because most startups are just trying to mimic the existing incumbents and just do it better. So many fintech startups, they say they're looking to change and transform financial services, but they're basically mimicking the incumbent big organisations and rapidly running into some of the same problems.
And I think that you said to me the other day that the best thing that you can be doing is thinking about what things aren't going to change, not about what is going to change. It's about what things aren't going to change. Yeah. That gives you a solid base to work with.
Yeah, what are the constants? Yeah, so we talk about digital transformation, and people try and analyse what are the things that we need to change, and where do we need to be flexible. And it's much better to say where do we need to fix our focus because on the things that aren't going to change.
Phil Smith, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Ian.